the USDA, their Department of Agriculture, did do a study on it last year, and they found they looked at 23 studies done since 2001 that showed, and this is across 14 countries, and those countries included China and New Zealand, and they showed that consumers were willing to pay a premium for non-GM food. And they found only 9 studies covering 8 countries where consumers would pay more for GM food, but usually only if convinced that it had nutritional benefits and there were no downsides such as spray residue. So I think the market has spoken. This is the USDA's Economic Research Service. They know that people don't want it. The only way that people, can express their not wanting of it is if it's labelled, which is why there is now this huge campaign to get laws in every state in America making it compulsory to label food that's got GM ingredients, and why there has been
I didn't know there were moves in every state in America. I've heard about moves in a couple of states.
Oh no, more than that. So,
how many?
26 right now. I mean, two have done it already. There's another 26 in the pipeline. So, and some of those states, the ones like Vermont, Maine, those New England ones, they've got an agreement that they're kind of supporting each other, like if you do...
Don't you think this is kind of nuts? Because if the quantity of GM food grown in America is what you all say it is, then they know that anything containing maize, fructose, soybean, cotton, it's all going to be GM. Why do they need it labelled for them?
There's some breakfast cereal in the States called Cheerios, which is really popular. It's made by General Mills. Apparently that is now being labelled as GM free because it's mostly oats, and they're removing the tiny amount of GE cornstarch or whatever.
So the push is coming, actually,
yes,
from the companies that don't have GM ingredients, and they're taking the high ground and hoping to capitalise from it.
General Mills had spent truckloads of money, millions, lobbying Congress not to get GE labelling, but it's finally cracked
because they've got other products.
Yes, and also there's been a non-GMO certified non-GMO verification system in the States for about 7 years now, and uptake of that is growing and growing. Starting with the smaller companies, of course, but now the bigger ones can come on with certain lines.
So John, what Christine seems to be saying is that, contrary to one's instincts, people's aversion to GM is growing, not diminishing. Does that not dent your enthusiasm at all?
Well, I'm not convinced that argument is real. I mean, Christine said that, but I'm not convinced that it's actually
you go and talk to the USDA. It's not me. I'm not some hippie.
But I did actually want to come back to this notion that we can be GE free. If you're producing food and on any scale, you're running plant and equipment. And so to keep that plant going, you need what are called lubricants. So you need oils, greases and so on. They've got to be food safe. They've got to be something that if the food contacts them, they're not going to contaminate the food. You don't want engine oil. So you use food safe lubricants. The key product in those food safe lubricants is either soybean oil or canola oil.
It may be beside the point.
And the majority of the world's supply is GM.
It may be beside the point, but then doesn't that raise the question of whether the oil from the canola plant contains any GM material?
Well, if they're cold-pressed oils, then arguably there's going to be DNA in there. So, I mean, you'd have to go and test for sure to see that you could pick up the DNA. But it's a GM product.
Well, we'll ban it then.
Yes. The conveyor belts would stop tomorrow, even in the wine industry.
I think there's an interesting question here: is what does GE free mean? Put a label, no GE. Well, I don't know if anybody's allergic to nuts or anything here. You read biscuits and whatever, and they have may contain nuts. It doesn't say does contain nuts. It says may contain nuts. Now, try and prove, and this is an issue we've had in the wine industry about processing aids. Try and prove that something does not contain GE, and you'll have a really tough time. How do you prove it? So you'd end up with everything labelled may contain GE, because that's actually what the real situation would be.
However, we may be going off track here, and it's all my fault. Because the subject is, should New Zealand be growing GM crops? I mean, is that not the issue?
When? Now? 10 years? 100 years?
But I think
Well,
in the
it's also,
interim,
it's more than that, Kim. Where should we be putting our scientific resources now in research? Should we be putting it into genetically engineering ryegrass to be drought resistant when we already know that mixed species pastures, this is Dairy NZ research, are drought resistant, and what's more, they cut nitrogen leaching by 50%.
Well, yeah, but hang on.
You know,
Tony, I don't think Tony was talking about drought resistance. He was talking about
that's
higher
what you're
oil
engineering
content.
it for, isn't it?
No,
Yes.
higher energy.
Oh, you're doing energy content, but
Well,
20,
no, but hold it there.
Yeah.
Why doesn't Tony deserve... Am I going a funny noise now? Well, why doesn't Tony deserve credit for trying to make ryegrass with a higher oil content?
Because there are other plants that are more nutritious already available.
Why don't you use those plants instead of messing around with ryegrass, Tony?
I don't know.
mixed pastures are critical to our primary industries. Ryegrass is a key component of them, and we might work with the key component that the sector wants. But other components of that pasture are critically important, whether it be the forage legumes or the herbs that are often mixed in with the pastures. Absolutely.
So
a whole ecosystem.
why are you not sympathetic to Tony's desire to improve a very important element of mixed pasture? What is it that makes you suspicious of that?
It's a dual pasture. You end up with ryegrass and clover. That's what we've always done. Why don't we keep on doing it but tweak it? How about we
Well, that's
do
what he's
something
doing.
different? You know, I mean...
Well, you want a completely new pasture.
No, but I mean, there are other species, and there's really good research showing that mixed species pastures are better for animal health. I mean, this is like at least 5 species.
So you're saying that he's messing around, wasting his time and taxpayers' money, doing something that is completely a waste of time.
Well, what I'm saying is that I don't want to get personal about
No,
Tony.
well, go on.
but
Because he's taking it personally, Christine. So go.
So what I'm saying is that there's this research around sustainability, and that's really crying out to be done in this country, and that if the money all goes on doing something to a problem for which we already have an answer, you know, that works right now and doesn't have any environmental downsides and actually has environmental upsides, then why aren't we putting our resources, instead of a 25% of ag research's budget going on to GE ryegrass research?
Oh, you said you wouldn't get personal. That was personal. What do you think needs to be studied in terms of sustainability that isn't, because the money's going elsewhere? To Tony.
Well, for instance, for a very modest $700,000, there was an excellent piece of research called the Grow Organic Dairy Project, which studied this mixed species thing and found the reduction in the nitrogen leaching. But it also, you know, it's a whole system thing. It was an animal health thing. There were vets from Massey, there were economists from Massey, and it was a farmer-scientist collaboration in which the farmers learnt from the scientists and the scientists learnt from the farmers, and there was a huge lot of knowledge about animal management in a sustainable way and pasture management and all those things. And that is the kind of research that we need, you know, that's really...
So you're suggesting, I'm not trying to pit you and Tony against each other, but are you suggesting that GM represents some kind of magic bullet that is starving the rest of the debate of its healthy nuances?
Yeah, and this is a thing from the press in 1996. World appetite for organics insatiable, and it's quoting Bruce Snowden from Heinz Wattey. And I talked to Bruce at that time, and that was the time at which they were saying, we don't want organic silver bullets, what we want is whole systems, and that's why we have this Core 5 farm here at Lincoln to try and see, because it's like, this is vegetable growers, and you need a mixed farming system. You can't just keep growing peas in the same paddock over and over. sustainably. So it's a way of actually, you need to study the whole farm ecosystem, and you're using animals to, fertilise the soil on a long rotation before you put your peas back in.
But couldn't Tony's ryegrass be part of an ecosystem? It's not one or the other, is it?
I don't believe it is. I think what we need to actually have here is just the opportunity to test these plants in the field to see what value they might have in the New Zealand pastoral system.
Can you do that?
No, we can't.
You cannot do that because the regulations are too constraining.
They're too constraining because at the moment, under our regulations...
Well, it would have helped if your man didn't let them pollinate.
That is always an obstacle. There's always a road person in the room.
That was an unfortunate incident, wasn't it?
Indeed.
6 Evans.
But coming back to the point about whether we should be GE-free or not, I don't think it's a matter of being blanket GE-free, but it's already in our food. It's about what the sectors want, what the individual sectors want. And just if we happen to grow GM ryegrass does not mean we can't be GM-free for grapes or kiwi fruit or something else.
So it's possible to have a mixed...
Absolutely.
...organic and GM. Do you agree with that, John?
I think it depends.
The Royal Commission suggested that as well.
You can say you don't use GM in your process, you don't deliberately engineer your grapes, you might engineer your yeasts that you use, but you could produce a product that doesn't use GM technology. It may not be GM free, but you could set a standard for your industry to meet a market demand.
Despite the fact that the bloke next door is growing GM
That might pose a
ryegrass.
challenge for you. Yes.
Philip, how would that help with your branding exercise? Oh, doesn't like it.
Well, I think it's
It's all or nothing, damn it.
It comes back to consumer perceptions. Do the consumers worry about that? Are they concerned if we have got GM-free wine, if next door there are genetically modified cows with 5 teats rather than 4? Now, I don't know the answer to that question. I suspect when they're consuming the wine, they're consuming the wine and they're thinking about the wine. When they're drinking their milk, they may be worrying about the cow with 5 or 6 teats rather than the traditional 4.
I think
consumers are complex beasts. We all are.
Organic wineries don't seem to have a problem with being organic when the winery next door is not organic, do they?
Well, there can be issues, yes.
Well, as long as it's spray drift, obviously.
Yeah. But, that's the case. We have about, I think, 7% organic vineyards in New Zealand. The goal's 20%.
It's possible to coexist then.
Yeah. The interesting thing, though, is with wine, which may be different from other food products, there's no premium for being organic or sustainable. What it may do is get you through the door of a restaurant or whatever. But consumers don't pay more for organic or sustainably farmed grapes or wine. They just don't.
So tell me again what the point is for you guys.